Okay, so when you go to your Apple Store folder, you should have an output folder. Output TXT files you don't have. That's a new folder I made because I was experimenting a little bit. So you should have this output folder. You need to have web scraping App Store multi, which is your main script. You need to have the scrape reviews, which basically does the operation in the background. There is a quick analysis script, which I haven't used this year in the course. So ignore it. It's there, but you don't need it. And then you need to have verified countries and Apple Store country codes. So these are also really important. In Apple Store country codes, you can see that this is basically just a list of available country codes provided by App Store. And because it's such a long list, I didn't want to put it in a main script because then you would have 120 lines more of code that you see. And I think this is very confusing for students. So I put it in the background. And in most cases, I think you're interested in getting as many reviews from as many countries as possible. So I don't really see why you would want to edit this. There might, however, be a situation in the future, maybe when you're writing your thesis, where you're interested in just a few of those countries, and then you could potentially change the country codes and get rid of the ones you don't want. So for example, you might just be interested in getting reviews from African countries, and then you could just search for African country codes and kick out stuff like BE for Belgium, for example, yeah? Whenever you edit a file, make sure you save it, and here to File, and then Save Python file is the way to go. So it doesn't have a save button right on top, so you always have to go to File and do your save operation, yeah? So if you want to change it. But in most cases, you're good just working with the web scraping main script. And here you have an opportunity to put in new podcasts that you would like to scrape. And by default, I think I gave you 3 different ones, but the list is potentially expandable. So if you are interested in scraping 4, you can just copy the middle line and put that in, and you have another space for putting in an app ID and an app name. And if you want to do 5, you just make another line. What is really, really important is that after the first few lines, you need to have a comma. Otherwise, there is going to be a failure because it's a list in Python, and list items are by default separated by commas. But after the last item in the list, you must not have a comma. If there's also a comma there, the script will also crash. So be careful when you edit this. But potentially you can have as many items on the list as you like. And I'll just do 2 for now to demo. So that means I'm getting rid of this and also of this one here in the middle, making sure that my last line does not have a comma at the end. This is a podcast that I've already scraped. That's one of the domestic abuse podcasts. It's called It's Not Normal, It's Toxic. So I just scraped that again. But for the second podcast, I'm going to choose a new one to show you how you can edit the variables. So this is the one I want. So Apple Podcast Web Player, because then you have the podcast Apple website. And we just go for something about love. We see what we find. And hopefully something that also has reviews. So this is from the New York Times. So I suppose this is listened to by quite a few people, and I expect it to have reviews. So I can check, yes, we do have reviews. So that's probably worth scraping, although there might not be so many. And you can see that here in the podcast URL, starting with podcastsapple.com, I have the name, which is Modern Love, and an ID. And that's what I need for my script. So normally what I do is I copy this. And then I jump back in here, and I just intermittently put this in there. So I have an ID that I can easily grab and ingest. So I just do this like this and change that. And then basically this stuff can go. And then I just grab Modern Love. And this is the name I want. And it goes here. Modern Love, and then the rest I also have to delete because that's not supposed to be there. So apart from that, there's not much I need to change. So unless I really want to focus on different countries, I can leave the script as it is. It's quite important always to save the script here after you've put in a new podcast name, and then you can run it. And like in the last script, we are starting with package installations. So just execute the first gray column. You will see that here you will get red sections with dependency errors, but they don't affect us. So they relate to packages that we're not even using. So you can just basically ignore. It's important that you do have the last line though. Installations and package import complete. That's really relevant. If that isn't there, try again. And then you can import the country list. And here it's the full list because we didn't edit it. Then you can jump to grabbing the podcast from the URL. So you just go here and then it says podcast defined. And now we are selecting the actual reviews, looping through podcasts and country codes. And this just happens in the background. So to see that the script is actually executing, you get a star. So when you look in the top right corner of your top left corner of your gray section, you can see that there's a star, and that means that the script is actually working. And of course, you also get stuff down there. Yeah. So there is output being generated. And you can always see which countries have reviews. So in this case, it's Australia, Canada, Great Britain, Italy, Pakistan, South Africa, and the United States. And then they're being collected. And here we even have more. I don't even know what all these country codes are. And in most cases, scraping works. Sometimes, though, there is an issue that like the local app store gives us invalid string values, and then we can't scrape it. But to be honest, in like the big picture, you still have enough reviews normally to work with. So ignore that some of these countries are giving you a string error. So don't worry. I've put in exception handling. This is the process encoding when you ignore something that goes wrong to get the rest. Yeah. So that's what I'm doing. So don't worry that some of the countries will not retrieve any podcast reviews. I'm still in contact with the developer of this new package I'm using to ask why that happens and if we can fix it. But this is definitely something for the future and does not concern us now. When this has happened, you can see that there is an information how big your final data frame is, and it's also all being exported to the output folder. So you go there, and then you should see all your podcasts that you scrape. So there is a few older ones that I can delete, so I don't need those files, so I can just get rid of them. But all reviews table 3 is the new combined review set of all the podcasts that I scraped today, and it's created 2 minutes ago, so that's perfect. And I've scraped also separately the reviews for Modern Love, and it's not normal, it's toxic. And then when you open the CSV files, you also should see nicely separated tables. I warn you that like in the original script that I gave you, I did have a different separator for the files because some of them came actually as like a tab separated file. So where I have a comma now, you will most likely still have a /t. And if that creates a table here that's not nicely separated, you should go to your script and change that. And there's 2 places where you have to do this, which is here and down here. So in these 2 lines, towards the end of the script, you have to replace separated T for a comma if the table isn't nicely separated. Yeah, but then you should be able to download it and process it as the other file we looked at. And also here, this podcast looks nice. And the combined file has reviews from both the podcasts in one. That could also be interesting for you to use if one podcast doesn't have enough data. And there you can see that we indeed have more than 800 rows. So although we could not capture data for some countries, it doesn't really matter because there's enough to work with from my perspective. So that's how that works. I'll stop the recording here.